Okay, good morning, everybody. It is 8:30. It's time to call the meeting to order for Tuesday, February 11th. And the first item of the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and we do have one addition today to the agenda, and that's authorization to execute agreement to extend the grant expiration date from 12/31/13 to 2/28/14 for the Youth Intervention Program funds from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety.
I'll move the agenda with the addition.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens to be heard today on issues not on the agenda? Any citizens to be heard? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of bills and vouchers, payment of bills and vouchers.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Okay, we'll move into our 8:35 item, request to fill legal secretary position in Clay County Attorney's Office, and Attorney Brian Melton isn't here yet. So, are we prepared to deal with this agenda amendment? Was Brian coming up?
I have not heard from him yet, so I don't know if he's coming or not.
Brian Melton?
Yeah.
Yes, he's coming.
Okay, all right, well, we'll just hold off on that for a couple minutes, and hopefully, we are a little bit early. So how about if we move into the, this agenda amendment here, the authorization to execute agreement to extend the grant.
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to, we can maybe start on committee reports. Keep this thing flowing here. Grant, do you have any committee reports today? All right. John, you always seem to have a committee report.
Not much. Let me see. Did have a meeting with the Historical Society with the campaign the funding campaign chairs, and had a highway tracking meeting after the meeting last week. I don't remember the details of that, but we're going to meet again today, I believe, to finish discussion on that. So that's all.
Okay, Frank?
Yeah, I had a meeting of the executive committee of the FMCOG. There we awarded some of the new auditing contract. Went over the financial outlook for the next year, or for the 2013 and 14. We went over some performance evaluation forms. I guess everybody's got some, but they had some too, and we went over and tried to improve on them. And then we looked at some, looking at some restaffing there. There's some retirements coming up there, and we're looking at restaffing. That was on Wednesday. Friday, I had Partnership for Health meeting down at Breckenridge. That was a very good meeting there. We had we're looking at forming a collaboration there with 4 counties there, getting in Becker and Ottertail County involved with that with the Clay Wilkin thing, and it got to be some very good discussions. It was 4 counties working together, trying to come up with one thing, and it brought up some good things. There's some changes made, and after a lot of discussion, I think we came to an agreement that everybody's going to agree with Becker County right now. I haven't signed it yet, but I think after the meeting, they were planning on signing and stuff, taking it back to their board. And it looked like they was going to go ahead with that, and it just, that was good. Then we went over the divisions. If the 4 counties do go together, what does each county do? We went to, one county will do administration, one county will do finance, and one county will do that. So, it's a good meeting, good open conversation and input. And, so it's just it's nice to work with different counties, see what's going to go on. And, it was a good discussion, and I think it all came down that we had to have a little trust amongst each of the counties. That we're doing this for the benefit of the citizens, and I think it's going to come out okay. And I guess the best trip there, got to ride down with Kathy McKay down there and back, so that was an interesting part too. So it was interesting to talk to.
Okay, that's it. Wayne?
On Thursday, February 6th, Children's Mental Health Local Advisory Council meeting, general business, and then we discussed several upcoming issues, one of which will be the presentation to the board in May. Agency reports from Clay County Social Services, Prairie St. John's, Lakeland Mental Health, and the Clay County Collaborative. Thursday, February 6th, Lake Agassiz Regional Library Executive Board meeting, general business, and then a policy was set regarding the closing of link sites if and when signatories do not come up with the full request needed to fund the library system. And instead of cutting back services in the actual libraries, link sites will be the first to go. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move back to our regular schedule here and bring up Clay County Attorney Brian Melton. Brian, good morning.
Sorry, I'm a little late.
You're just a minute late. Not like our highway engineer. He seems to get hung up on trains all the time.
Right, we get that a lot, I think. So. Well, good morning. I'm here, when I was here last, we had a request, or approved a request that I could fill a legal secretary position, and to backfill for a paralegal position. And so internally, one of my legal secretaries accepted the paralegal position, and that position is now open, and we're currently advertising for that, and that is through the 12th, so through tomorrow. In the meantime, just last week, one of my other legal secretaries submitted her resignation, and she's done as of the 18th of February. So my request is to be able to fill this second position, or this other legal secretary position, and then I would just ask to be able to use the same time period and use the interview process and end up hiring 2 legal secretaries at once. So I'm asking to fill that position, and it's obviously a very necessary position, and we would need it.
Okay.
I'll second, I have a question. Do you, you don't have to re-advertise then, you can use the same?
I think we just use, I talked to HR, we would just use the same one, and just, it's a legal secretary position, the same.
Qualifications.
Same qualifications, we're doing the same price range, we would just look to let them know we're looking to hire 2 people.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you, Jim.
All right.
I appreciate it. I saw they gave me 25 minutes for position here, so I'm glad to see Rhonda's here ready to go. So. Otherwise, we would just be sitting around talking for a while. So.
You thought there'd be a lot of discussion on that one, huh?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. All right, thanks, gentlemen.
Okay, our next item is Child Support Fraud and Collections Programs Reviews. And we have Rhonda and Sandy, huh?
I like it noted we're early. But we're not talking for that extent. Yeah.
So you're saying we're going to get done a little early.
That's a good thing, isn't
You
it?
can be, you know, because you're scheduled to go now till 9:40.
An hour and 15 minutes here, so.
We got a lot to say. No.
Okay, well, we are here, this is our third in our series of trying to bring to you more detailed information about the different units at social services. So a couple months ago, we talked about our adult mental health. Last month, we talked about our income maintenance unit, and this month, we want to talk about child support, fraud, and collections. So you did get the PowerPoint in your packet, but we thought we would have it up here as a part of public education as well for anyone watching. We're going to talk a little bit about the staffing in Sandy's unit. Sandy is our supervisor in the child support, fraud, and collections, and Sandy's been with that unit, how long, Sandy, now?
Really?
Long time.
Almost 30 years?
Almost 30 years. So you can see why she's here, and she's the expert and going to spend most of her time talking with you about the unit.
One of my former 7th graders.
That's great. So we're going
All
to...
those lifers in the military.
I think we do here, too.
We're going to talk about the services administered in Sandy's unit, child support, fraud, and collections, and then talk about some things that are on the horizon. And Jenny is quite involved with Sandy's unit as well, so she may have things to add as we go. So the first slide really is just a snapshot of our social services, and you'll see the highlighted in green there is Sandy's unit. So she's got 6 child support officers, 2 collections officers, 5 support enforcement aides, and 2 welfare fraud investigators. So she has a total of 15 staff under her supervision. Okay. So the first program area we're going to talk about is welfare fraud, and this is somewhat of a continuation of the conversation we had with the income maintenance unit. You had some questions about that program in particular, so we'll start with that. So I'm going to turn it over to Sandy.
Okay, so as Rhonda just said, we have 2 investigators in our unit, and both of these positions are eligible for 50% federal financial participation dollars to help fund that program. And in addition to the FFP, we also get a state grant to pay for fraud prevention, which is the FPI program. And our current contract for the grant is $125,000, and that's for state fiscal years 2014 and 2015, and that funds the front-end investigation. We have 2 types of investigations. Front end is intended to prevent a grant from being issued in error, and then the back end or criminal investigations are for cases where the grant's already been issued and now there's overpayments in that type of case. With the FFP, we can spend up to with the state grant, we can spend up to $125,000 including the FFP. So it's not in addition to any other funding, it includes the FFP.
I was just going to add that, and maybe this is further in the presentation, but that dollar amount covers our 2 county projects. So we also serve Becker County with the fraud, the FPI program. So we started that in 2009. So.
Yep. So that was the next bullet.
Oh, there we go.
It's in there. In 2009, the state reorganized how they handle the FPI programs. And we were asked to become a regional host county and take over the investigations for Becker County in addition to Clay County. Referrals for investigations can come from a variety of sources. It's generally from a financial worker, but it can also come from child support, social workers, the public. The state actually has a fraud hotline where somebody can call the state, and then the state would then filter it down to the correct county. Most of the referrals that we receive concern household composition, unreported income or employment, and verification of residency.
Who reports this stuff? Who comes? You mean households report this, or
Well,
people, neighbors, or what?
We get a lot of neighbors, relatives, custodial or non-custodial parents, and then again, the financial workers, child support officers, comes from many different sources.
We got an email off of our county website yesterday that was a situation like this. Someone was reporting concern about a family that was getting public assistance, and concern about how they're using the money, concern about their reporting of income and expenses and that kind of stuff. So we get them in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
So referrals to FPI, like I said, generally they come from financial workers, and as they're reviewing an application or a recertification, they may be concerned about some of the information that's been submitted or omitted from the referral or from the application. And so they can make a referral to fraud prevention, asking an investigator to try and verify if someone's living in the home, if there's income that hasn't been reported, if a child is still there, we've received a report that the child's moved out, that type of thing. The investigator then would go out, try and verify the facts, and give a report back to the financial worker. At that point, if no fraud's been determined, the fraud case is closed. The information is provided to the financial worker, and they can go ahead and process the case. If fraud is determined to have occurred, then the financial worker would calculate savings and any overpayments and provide this information back to the investigator. And that's how the state then tracks the success of the fraud prevention program. They're looking at the dollars that this program prevented from being issued in error and the savings that come from that. And the process that they use is they multiply it by 3 months because they feel that generally it would take about 3 months to catch somebody who's been committing fraud on the welfare system.
So who do the savings go back to then? To the county or?
This is savings
That we wouldn't
goes
have
back to
spent,
the-
you know, but we've already spent some of it. So if we collect the money back, does that go back to the county or does that go back to the
Yeah,
state
that
funds?
comes
Or
in
does-
the collections piece of it.
Okay.
How much actually comes back. It's not 100%, but a portion of it does. But these are mostly state and federal dollars. That's why the FPI program is essentially 100% funded between state and federal dollars.
Okay.
Once the investigation is complete, if it does appear that fraud's happened, the investigator could proceed with an administrative disqualification process, which is also called ADH, where they might ask a client to sign an intentional program violation form, acknowledging that they didn't report accurately, and that then allows the financial worker to apply correct sanctions to that case. We also would make a referral to the collections unit to recoup any overpayment amounts, and we'll talk about that in the next section. The overpayments are then paid back to the state, and then the county is entitled to retain certain percentages depending on what the programs are. And if the overpayments exceed $500, we would consult with the county attorney's office for possible criminal charges. Our next slide is some statistics, and I split Clay County and Becker County apart so that you can see each of them. I did 5 years worth of statistics so that you can kind of see the history. So for Clay County, we get a lot of referrals for FPI, and you can see that they've been going up consistently in the past few years. In 2013, we did 562 FBI investigations. Out of those, we had direct savings of $150,397, and that's the prevention of those grants being issued in error, and that covers, you know, a wide range: medical assistance, food support, cash grant, all of those different programs. Then the state would calculate out cost avoidance and say that they actually avoided issuing over $450,000 in error, because it's that 3-month time period that they look at. We had overpayments resulting from those investigations to the tune of $439,161. So even when you're preventing the grants from going out, you're finding that there still was money that was issued in error, and all of that then goes to the collections department for reimbursement back to the state.
So what is the history of being able to get that money back once it's been paid out?
It really kind of depends on the type of overpayment. For some overpayments, it's an automatic deduction from future grants. Others have to be repaid. But that we'll look at in the collections piece.
Because I would imagine most of those dollars, when these recipients receive them, they don't have a lot to begin with, and they probably spend that quickly.
Yep. And that's going to be very evident, I think, when we look at the collection numbers.
Okay.
Is that, you know, these are people that are already living at poverty level for the most part, and it's very difficult to repay monies that they got.
But you also said that if it's over $500, then there's fraud or something. Aren't they charged with fraud then or something, if it's over 500?
Over 500, we look at criminal charges.
Criminal charges, okay.
Yep, so we contact the county attorney's office to advise them of, here's what the situation was. Would they be willing to prosecute? And they look at those.
Not that that's going to get you any money back, but...
Well,
What does the average days mean on that chart?
That's the average days from receiving the referral to completion.
Oh,
We're required by the state to have that done in under 15 days. I believe that's the time frame. But we have very fast turnover in Clay County. When you look at the Becker County, you'll see those time frames are more extended, and that's because of the distance. What we do with Becker County is, Adam is the investigator who handles Becker. He tries to go there on Wednesdays. So, we might get a referral late Wednesday. He's already back, so he won't be able to get there till the following week.
Yep.
But a lot of what he does with Becker can be done by phone or by mail, that type of thing. But if he actually has to go to a home or try and find somebody, it can take a little bit longer to complete those. And that's the main reason I separate out the statistics, is because the average days in Becker County really brings out the average for the whole region. So doing them separate is a little bit different.
I got a question. If we're in charge of Becker County, we do the fraud investigation for Becker County. Shouldn't we be treating them the same as Clay County then, or do we just set a certain day aside for Becker County then, or shouldn't those investigations be done when we receive them, or?
A lot of them are, because they can be done by phone, or even in Clay County, some of it is an employment verification that's being mailed out. The state doesn't expect us to try and drive there on a daily basis when we get a referral. And you'll note that the number of referrals we see from Becker County is substantially lower
Yes.
than what we receive in Clay. But we have to be fiscally responsible to, meet our grant also. When it, takes 40 minutes just to get to the edge of Becker. And then a lot of it is up on the reservation, and it's 2 hours.
The
So-
other piece is that I hear from time to time the travel up there, and then they're not able to locate anyone at home. So then that extends the time if they try to go back that same day or come back another day. So when you're right in town, it's a little bit easier to run out there a few times a day to try to catch people at home when they're doing these investigations.
Okay, so then moving on to the criminal fraud cases and then the administrative disqualification process. The IPV that I already mentioned, that can be signed in cases where the client has misrepresented facts on their application. We also do some of those on cases that we've referred to the county attorney's office, and in discussion, the county attorney then has discussion with either the person or their attorney, and a decision is made to have them sign the IPV versus going through the legal process, so that they don't end up with charges filed, but there's still a penalty for them. In that process, the IPV, the person that's applying for benefits is sanctioned from receiving benefits for that program for 1 year after a first-time violation, for 2 years after a second violation, and it's a lifetime denial of those benefits for the third violation. And then there's also a 10-year violation for clients who receive benefits in more than one state at the same time. And interestingly enough, that happens more often than you would believe, that somebody moves here from, say, Kansas, they're getting a grant there, they apply here, don't disclose that, so we don't know that there's benefits being issued in two states at the same time until we get certain reports that come out nationwide that would indicate that that's been happening.
These violations, are they county imposed, or is that a state imposed thing?
State.
State?
Yep. This is all based on state rule. Then again, any cases where the overpayments are over $500, we would consider for referral to the county attorney's office. So dollar amounts from $500 to $999 would be a gross misdemeanor, and $1,000 and over would be a felony. In the criminal area and with the ADH, in 2013, we made 71 referrals to the county attorney's office. when you make the referral, then, they have to process everything, do what they need to do. But on a lot of these cases, we have warrants issued. So you can refer and refer, but that, as you can see, we had 12 criminal convictions last year. So you don't always see that every case that goes there is resolved right away. Some of these are quite old, and we're trying to find the person so that they can be brought back for justice.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
I looked at these numbers in advance of the hearing, and I was kind of startled by them. They don't look completely effective in the prosecution area, so it kind of bothered me. And what I found in looking at our numbers a little closer is that there's many of these referrals that are made, cases are opened, and in lieu of a conviction, the prosecutor has entered into an agreement with the individual to pay back what is owed. And when that amount is paid back, then the file is dismissed. So it does not result in a criminal conviction, but it would result, in some cases, in repayment of what's owed. So it put my mind at ease a little bit more, because I didn't think these numbers looked all that impressive, but...
So there was restitution there for
correct.
a lot of them that
We
doesn't
would-
show here.
Yeah, we would get restitution in lieu of a conviction. Of course, on the most serious cases, that's not going to be the way that we proceed, but in some cases, that's the prosecutor's call to say, if you could pay that money back, I would dismiss this file. And so I think that happens a lot, too.
Yeah, it does happen a lot, and that apparently is something the state doesn't track, because I pulled these off the state reports. And so that's something maybe I'll suggest to them that they look at.
So, Jenny, what you're saying is out of those 71 there, and where there was 12 convictions, there's a number in between those that were settled without needing convictions
Right.
tied to them.
What I would call a somewhat positive result in that we got the savings,
Got the
or
money
the
back.
cost back to the county and the state, but it did not result in a criminal conviction. So, made me feel a little bit better, because 12 out of 71,
It's not very good.
not highly impressive.
Well, worse is the 2 out of 46 the year before.
Oh, yeah, 2012, that's even better.
Well, and that may throw the overpayment totals off then, too, that
Sure.
that the state isn't tracking that piece of it. They're tracking the...
So Jenny, one more question for you. When you, so we have basically these two categories where we have the 500 to 999 and the 1,000 and up. Would the 1,000 and up have less likelihood because it's then considered a felony? Do they still offer opportunities for them to have their charges dropped in those cases?
They do offer, another thing that can be considered if you're charged with a felony is a conviction to a lower level. So there's always options for plea negotiation. But yes, even a felony, there are circumstances where I know that happens, and it's really case by case and has to do with the fraud that was perpetrated and how it was perpetrated and the person, maybe their criminal history. All kinds of circumstances come into play. So
It's still considered a violation, though, no matter whether they pay it back or not, isn't it? It still comes as a violation.
And as Sandy said, so these overpayments, really this 48,000 collected in overpayments would relate to the 12 convictions and the 7 ADHs. The collections probably that you're talking about, Jenny, are showing up in our collections area, I would guess then.
Okay, so then moving on to the collections unit, we have 2 full-time collection officers that work toward collecting the outstanding debt that's owed to the county or through the fraud area or the income maintenance area, any overpayments that are owed to the state. Both of these positions are also eligible for 50% FFP. The areas of collection that they cover would include the public assistance overpayments, and that would be household error, agency error, welfare fraud. They work with foster care for short-term placements, collecting parental fees and recovery of a child's income. They collect for detox for the highway department. They do probate and medical assistance recovery. They collect for environmental health and county burial.
Do we ever see where county employees are probably signing people up for stuff that people aren't, you know, who say that the recipient, you know, wasn't eligible for it, or do we have ever county employees that probably didn't do their job in checking it out far enough? I mean, how much of a check do we do before we put these people on the assistance program?
Well, for the public assistance programs in our income maintenance unit, certainly there are times that maybe a staff has misinterpreted the rule or maybe discounted something that shouldn't have been in terms of an income, or not included something that should have been included. So we do have agency error from time to time as well. I think particularly over the last couple of years with all of our turnover in staff, we've seen some of that. The State Department of Human Services comes out and audits many of our programs, and they look for those kinds of errors, and then provide feedback for training specific to workers or whatever. But certainly that does happen. It can be a combination of agency error or information that was either omitted or not accurate on the part of the applicants. So it can be both. And a lot of times if it's an agency error situation, we correct it right away, and if it's an overpayment, we alert the individual that it's an overpayment, and we can work with them on you know, how to pay that back, or if future grant amounts are reduced by whatever is owed back. But we try to catch them as soon as we can. We've had challenges with that over the last couple of years. We've gotten behind, but we've made a lot of progress on being more caught up on some of those issues, so that if it is an error on our part, we're catching it sooner. So.
Okay. For their duties, they have a wide variety of duties. In addition to collecting these amounts, would be acting as the representative payee for children that are in placement that receive Social Security benefits. So they work directly with the Social Security office to redirect benefits to pay the county or reimburse the county for any placements or that type of thing that the child is receiving that the county is financially responsible for. They enforce probate cases where the county has a preferred claim, and they act as the personal representative to act in the best interest of that estate and represent that estate. That can include selling real estate and managing trust accounts for contract for deed cases. So they've...
Does that happen very often?
Not really often. We just had one in the past year that we had property that we took on to sell because that property was going to repay a large chunk of the assistance that was provided for that person. Yeah, but it's not as common anymore as I think it might have been years ago.
So would that have been assistance through fraud, you mean, or?
No, I believe that is medical.
Okay, so it's just a form of reimbursement.
Yep. They do a lot of skip tracing, trying to locate people to be able to try and collect from them. They file for revenue recapture on overdue debt, so we can try and intercept Minnesota state tax returns. And they also perform several functions in support of the child support office. We have them facilitating buccal swabs for paternity testing because they don't directly work with paternity cases. We're separating duties and trying to avoid conflict of interest there. We have them monitoring driver's license suspension cases. They take care of judgment renewals, and they also compile detailed breakdowns for the child support unit when they need a month-by-month breakdown showing charges and the amount paid and the running balance. So then you had asked earlier about incentive and retention rates, what the county is able to retain from different types of cases. So in public assistance, the overpayments and probate, for child care, we can receive or keep 25% of the amount that's collected. Diversionary work program is also 25%. General assistance is 50%. medical assistance is 1/2 of the non-federal share, and the expectation is this might change with the Affordable Care Act, but up until this point, it's at 25%. And we also receive 50% for Minnesota supplemental aid. SNAP, or the food support benefits, it's a little bit different. We can retain 20% for a household error, 10% for a top household error, or 35% for fraud, or 17.5% for top fraud.
So where does this money go to then? I guess that was my question. I mean, when you recover this money, does that go into public health fund or?
No, that would,
No, we collect it, the county will collect it, and then it gets paid back to the state, and then we get to keep these percentages
Right, you
based on
get
the
to keep
type
those
of program.
percentages.
Yeah.
But where does that money, that goes
It-
back into your fund?
It
or-
comes into the social service budget, yep, and then we budget for it. We kind of look at our history of that income, and then we budget the revenue in our overall budget.
Okay.
for a state recovery, we receive 10% for alternative care and 25% for medical assistance. And again, that's 1/2 of the non-federal share, and that, again, may change with the Affordable Care Act.
What does top mean?
Oh,
What's the difference between the household air and the top household air?
So with the,
yeah, I'm drawing a blank.
I'm not exactly sure either,
Yeah.
but I'm going to guess that the 10% top household error, I was thinking that it was more of a reporting error. It could be a combination of our processing, because I'm thinking the top fraud would be more of intentional omission of information in terms of getting food support. So I'm not
I'm thinking
exactly sure on that.
Top is federal, isn't it?
Well,
I think that's federal.
the federal piece?
Yeah.
Well, and that could be because this is a federal program, so
Yep.
we'll have to research that one.
Yeah,
John.
Okay, you can
I'm just drawing a blank, but I'll get it for
Send us
you.
back a memo. Thank you.
Okay. Then for collection statistics, I gave you the information for 2012 and 2013. We collect for detox, and with detox, the way that those come to us is the Public Health Department doesn't send us a bill if they're on MA. They try and bill insurance if the person is privately covered, and then they attempt to collect for 3 or 4 times before they actually refer it to us. You'll note that the balance due is quite high in this area, and that's one of my things that I'd like to work on in this next year, is we don't have a write-off policy. So some of this debt is very, very, very old. And it's people that we're probably never going to be able to collect from, or we don't know who they are. We run into issues where when they go to detox, they don't give their true name, they don't give their social security number or correct address. So we've got money on the books for people that we really don't know who they are.
So we're sitting out there with these like receivables of that big a dollar number, that's just kind of never gonna happen?
Yes.
Yeah, we gotta
And
correct
that's,
that.
yeah, and that's probably from, so the 24,000 amount collected for 2012, you know, is clients likely that had received detox in 2012, but that balance due is from 20 years going back. So
Does that show up in the county records or in the state records?
That would be.
this would show up in the county records. Because detox is pretty much totally a county responsibility.
So in essence, in our system, we're showing that there still is a receivable out there basically for $2.4 million. That's probably never gonna happen.
Right,
Or when you go down to the totals with everything, it's $4 million.
right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can the county write that off?
Yeah, and
With a policy. Now that's approved by the board, yes.
That might be something we want to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of other counties do have policies, and we've been starting to gather some of those to get some ideas on.
Yeah, and I'd certainly be interested to see how far back some of this goes, because it's, you know, and if it's something that we're maintaining on our books as an actual receivable, when in reality it's bad debt, then we need to correct that to make our financial statements real and accurate.
Yeah, and I think we'll want to pull Lori into this conversation, because exactly how it looks on her side, I'm not
Right.
exactly sure.
Yeah, and I
but-
will have to ask
Yeah.
Lori, but $4 million is a lot of money
Yeah.
that's sitting out there that,
Yeah. For probate and county burial, in 2012, the balance due of over 200,000, that was just that timing piece where we add on the amount when we know what it's going to be. Added it on late in the year, it got paid off in January, so inflated the amount for there. You can see in 2013 reduced drastically to under $12,000, which is just then that time frame of us adding it on to the system when we know what the amount is going to be and then receiving it. So that's pretty normal. In public assistance, there again, there are very large amounts due and owing. We do have some write-off policy on that from the state, but it's still, you know, these are people that don't necessarily have the means to repay debt at, you know, $100 a month even. A lot of it is $10 a month, $25 a month, whatever is affordable.
So are these numbers that have been determined that they have the ability to pay back?
No, these are the amounts that were issued in error.
Oh, okay,
So,
they were
yep,
issued in there.
overpayment. So maybe somebody, for example, that might be receiving a MFIP cash grant, for example. So it's state and federal dollars, and maybe they were determined to be issued in error. So now they have to pay it back as an overpayment. And again, the majority of that goes back to the state. But, so that would be an example of what would fall under that, the public assistance arena.
I guess that was my question before, sort of leading up to this. You know, we got that much money. I mean, we're looking at $1 million here, $1,500,000. I mean, we've overpaid people that much, and that's why I say, who's qualifying these people for this assistance?
Well,
And then we say they're not qualified.
well, and again, this overpayment amount, this, for example, under public assistance, the 1.2 million, that goes back for extended periods of time as well. It's not just the current year. So that balance kind of keeps being carried forward from year to year because we haven't.
Well, in the current year from 2012 to 2013, it went up another $305,000 that we overpaid last year.
Yep.
Okay.
So is there a, you know, that is kind of an alarming number.
Yeah, I mean,
That
that's
we're-
how much we overpaid.
That's, and I'm just curious about, and earlier on I heard you talking about, you know, a process of audit that's done, but can we review that process of audit, and when does that process of audit start? Is it starting too late? Or?
Well, it's state and federal audits. So last year, we had a medical assistance audit that we were involved in. We'll actually be having a SNAP or a food support audit coming up probably in the next month or so. And they'll look at case records, they'll look at how staff have authorized food support. They'll actually come and kind of go through our system. So we'll get a report from that audit as well. So the different programs have different auditing procedures, and maybe that's a topic I can bring more information forward to you on in terms of how those audits occur.
But do we need to have a state program to do an audit? Do we have an internal program to do an audit that our people are doing the right job?
Well, I mean, you certainly can have your own checks and balances. But,
Well, our system, the system in terms of the way the staff determine eligibility, all the data gets put into this system and eligibility is determined in this system. So, and again, there's various ways, and again, this represents various programs. The biggest program probably that would show up in probate, the medical assistance cases, wouldn't it, Sandy? Under your probate area? Would that be the MA, or does that fall under public assistance? Public assistance. The biggest area for public assistance, too, is those cases where, an individual is determined eligible for medical assistance, they have high medical bills, maybe they go into nursing homes, and then they have kind of the estate, although those would fall under the probate. That's why that's so high. Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Wayne.
Frank, when these people apply and they're given assistance, they meet all the criteria set up by the social services and the state and federal government. It's only afterwards, I believe, that you find out that there's some fraud involved or they've given you false information or whatever. But according to your rules and regulations, you don't give them this kind of assistance unless they qualify for it.
Correct.
And what happens afterwards is what you're dealing with here.
Yes.
So I don't think there's any
Well, I'm not saying they're doing
concern
it
on our
wrong.
part of the
I'm just
social
thinking-
services department at all.
Yeah.
I just think there's a big number. I mean,
Yeah.
we got to pay attention to it, I think,
Yeah. It's a big number. What might be helpful and actually even interesting for us as well is to compare our numbers as to what it looks like statewide to see if that's kind of a common theme. I think what we're seeing here in our county is not uncommon to what other counties are seeing as well. It's a fair question, though, to ask about when we have overpayments, how many might relate to applicant issues versus agency issues. And I think that's a fair question to look at and assess. I don't
I just looked at a $305,000 increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that looked big to me.
Well, and it's, and then you look at the number of clients here, and I guess going between what difference between Frank and what Wayne were asking, so when we've determined this 1.5 million is a balance due, I'm again going to try to go back to find out, was the result of this fraud an application, or is it multiple things? What is it?
I would say it's multiple things. It could be fraud in application, it could be...
Misinterpretation by staff? Is that a possibility? I don't know.
Yeah,
so
I
I'm
guess
asking.
I can't answer that. I don't work in that unit to know that there could be misinterpretation. I think they take the information that's provided. It looks complete. They process it according to their rules, but maybe there's more to it that wasn't reported, that
But
kind of thing,
ultimately,
or later.
it's come back to us that we overpaid
Yes,
$1.5 million.
yep.
Over many years. I mean, we're talking...
Well, yeah, but in the
Yes.
case of 12 to 13, like Frank said, it's like 300 grand.
Is this 1,000, the number 1,042, number of clients, is that for 1 year, or is that altogether?
That's altogether.
Okay, so we're talking $1,500 on the average for each one, in overpayments. Yeah, but if it goes back, it'd be interesting to know how far back it does go. If it's
Yeah.
if we've never taken names off, or if it, do we go back 40 years or something, or is it something that we have adjusted at some point?
It's one thing where you have to go and you have to clean up and you have to do a write-up, but there's also another thing about what can we do as a county to improve our processes so that fewer of those things happen. I think this is a significant dollar amount when you go down to the grand total of all of these different. $4 million is the total there. And again, I understand this is over a long period of time, but so boy, I tell you what, those kind of numbers, it's indicating to me that maybe we should have a review of how we internally manage this. And I don't say that out of disrespect for what's been done. I just say it that the numbers just appear to be big enough that you know, we need to research this.
Yeah.
We need to go into this a little bit deeper and find out why this is happening.
I would say one of the themes across the state, and one of the things that you often hear from AMC and our MAXA Association, is kind of this pleading to the state to simplify some of these programs. The multitude of programs and the various eligibility requirements, the standards that have to be applied to each of these programs is incredibly complicated. And so our staff, and for us, we've had a 40-some% turnover in staff in the last couple of years. That is absolutely going to impact, number one, our efficiency in processing applications, but number two, that learning curve in trying to apply all of these very complicated state rules to these programs. So it is very complicated, and I don't think that our numbers are out of sync with, unfortunately, what's happening around the state. And I think that's why it's getting some attention at the state level, that we can't have these programs so complicated and different asset limits for every different program, and if this, then that, and if, you know, it's incredibly complicated. Our staff go through quite intensive training for these programs, and some of the things that we've been trying to do is, we used to have staff specialize in certain programs so they can really develop that expertise, but the volume got too large. There was some different practices around the country about how to manage these caseloads, so that's when we went to a case banking system. You've heard some of that. That has not gone without some challenges as well, so we've kind of gone back to specializing a little bit, family to adult services, to try to maintain some of that expertise and handle the volume. But the volume in this unit is crazy, and I think that's why we added a staff person. 2 years ago we added a financial worker. Last year we added back a supervisor, and I think that was a good step. We've added those financial workers that we needed to deal with for MNsure, which is also a big step that we needed to do, because we need to get the volume down for these staff, the volume of cases that they're expected to process.
Brandon and Sandy, I certainly don't want you to take this the wrong way, but when we, when we're seeing numbers like this is an area where I think this truly becomes a role of a commission to recognize things like this and to help figure out a way to reduce and minimize these. So we have to be able to dive into this a little bit more. I really think we do. I'm not trying to degrade any of your staff. You said it very well with the number of turnover you have and the complexity of it. But that doesn't mean that we still shouldn't be able to have safeguards to prevent some of this stuff from happening. So we're going to talk more about this. I know Darren's been...
Just a quick comment on that chart, though. It looks like almost every other category in the balance due has gone down from 2012 to 2013. It's just really the public assistance one that has really shown a big jump in the balance due. So maybe it needs to be more focused in that area rather than, it looks like every other category has gone down, which I'm assuming would be through the collections process, if that's the case.
Frank, did you?
I have one more. Is this Clay County thing, or is this Clay Becker together?
This is just Clay County. Yeah,
Okay.
we don't do collections for Becker.
Okay, does Becker County have their own staff where they go in and sign up?
Yes.
They have their own staff?
Yep, the-
Because I'm just looking at, when I look at Clay County figures as far as referred stuff, last year we had 562, Becker's 85.
Oh, you're back in the fraud.
I went back to, some of those cases, I just went back a little bit. Do we have more people here signing up here? Because, I don't know, is the assistance...
Well, I'm sure we have a higher demand.
Are we, what's our I don't even know what our comparison is as far as population. I know we got
We're about
about
double.
60,000.
We're about double what they are.
We're about double, okay. Very good, thank you.
Well, I guess I'd like to propose something here, just on this, just so that, we need to move on to the rest of your presentation for one thing, but.
Oh, we could be done.
But we can't just let this lie either. And I'm glad it was brought forward and questions were raised, but, I'd like to, as we leave here, when Brian gets back, to talk to Brian and maybe Rhonda and the two of you, and I would love to meet with you to find out internally what your processes are right now, and then maybe we can work together and do some more advising with the board here to try to help establish a better process, because I just see the numbers here suggest there could be something better.
Yeah, one of the things we'll isolate the data on this slide and get
Okay.
some comparison information, and I can prepare some information for you in terms of how these programs are audited, and just put some more meat around this
Yeah.
conversation, and then we can
Yeah,
look for.
that would be good.
Yeah.
No. I guess I too want to say, I'm not trying to prolong this or anything. This is very interesting to me, and I'm glad you're presenting that, so, don't mean to
Yeah.
reference your department either, because I think this is important to the people of Clay County. I mean, this is their.
Well, and I think this is interesting because, often when I come before you to talk about some of the issues in our income maintenance unit and what we're trying to do, and, you've heard time again about the caseloads. I didn't think so much about this data and how this plays into that process. So obviously that's become clear, and so this will be a piece that I think will be useful as we try to look at what things we can do to make a difference for that unit. So
I think we need to be able to stop the high rate of climb in terms of uncollectible. That's where our goal needs to be.
Yeah.
One other thing I just noticed here too, it appears as if under the public assistance that there's 103 more clients this year in this category than there was last year. So that's a lot of additional people that we haven't been able to collect from.
Okay, well, let's move on, but just so you know, we're going to be following up on this one.
Don't worry, interruptions, okay.
No, you're fine. Thank you. Can ask all the questions you want. That's very good. All right, so we'll move on to the child support enforcement. Are you ready to go there?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so in child support, we have 6 child support officers and 5 support enforcement aides. The child support officers handle all of the legal case initiation, or order completion, order establishment, enforcement of the more difficult cases, establish paternity and modify orders. And the support enforcement aides work toward case initiation, interstate cases where we've asked another state to enforce on our behalf, and income withholding cases where the employer is withholding the child support obligation directly from a non-custodial parent's income to pay the child support. The services that we provide in the child support area, we locate parents, we establish parentage, we establish court orders for basic support, medical support, and child care support, and those 3 together are considered to be child support. We enforce court orders for support, we review and modify those orders, we enforce support when one parent doesn't reside in Minnesota, and we also collect and process payments. The positions in the child support area are eligible for 66% federal financial participation, so a little bit higher than in the income maintenance area where the fraud and collections officers fall. We also get federal and state incentives to help fund the program. Unfortunately, with budget issues in the past years, a lot of that funding has gone away or has been reduced pretty drastically, but we do still receive some funding. The federal incentives that are received are based on statewide performance in 5 different areas. That would be paternity establishment, current supports collected, establishment of court orders, collections on cases with arrears, and the cost effectiveness of the program. The way that the federal incentives are allocated each year is based on the total percentage of caseload that Clay County would have then statewide. So we get 1.41% of that federal grant to the state. So they estimate our incentive for federal fiscal year 2013 at $169,200. It doesn't get evened out until a year later, so you still kind of have to estimate it. Using the same criteria for the federal monies, we also receive state incentives based on a 2% fee for non-public assistance cases and a $25 federal annual fee. To help make up for some of the funding issues that were happening in the state several years ago, they determined that they would charge a 2% fee for every dollar sent to a non-custodial parent or to a custodial parent on a non-public assistance case. So for every $100 that was sent out, $2 is retained by the state to help fund program. For the state fee then, for the 4 quarters ending September 30th of 2013, we had received $20,340. What I did for looking at federal performance measures, I pulled Becker and Otter Tail in as our 2 closest kind of like-sized counties, and then I looked at other counties within the state that are within 1,000 cases higher or lower than Clay County to kind of give you an idea of comparable case size. Clay County is equal to or exceeds the state average in all of the performance areas. We do struggle in arrears collection, and that I think is largely because we're a border county. And one of the things that the state provided information-wise this year that I haven't seen before is looking at the number of counties and what their interstate caseload is like. And Clay County is one of 4 counties statewide that has 30 to 39% of their caseload as an interstate caseload. And that's really pretty high, and that makes us dependent on other states for collection on both current support and arrears. And what happens, especially when we're bordering with Fargo as the largest city in North Dakota, is you'll have a North Dakota order. North Dakota's collecting the support. The person moves to Clay County, goes on public assistance for a year. We may not receive payment during that time period. They move back to North Dakota, so North Dakota continues enforcing that case. Well, they're going to make sure that current support is paid first, and if there's an unpaid balance assigned to the state, that's going to get paid before any monies would come to Minnesota. So we have a lot of cases that are sitting here. We can't do anything. Our hands are really tied there. One of the things that I'll be watching in the next year are our percentage on orders established. Clay County started e-filing last year, and we're finding that that's a pretty time-consuming process. We started in March, and I looked at a combination of establishing court orders, modifying court orders, and establishing paternity orders. In 2012, we did 308 cases. It dropped to 245 cases last year. And the only big change we really had last year was e-filing. So I'm kind of watching that and trying to figure out a way to better handle that process, because I think it's starting to affect our numbers and could eventually affect what Clay County is entitled to in incentives. And that's not something we have a choice over either. It's a mandatory thing. Some of the statistics for federal fiscal year 2013. We collected $8,303,918 for families. Of that amount, just about $6.5 million went towards current support owed, and $1,800,000 plus went towards the arrears owing on cases. So every year that amount goes up. That's largely due to the income withholding. The vast majority of cases are paid through income withholding.
Could you, what do you mean you collect it? What does that mean? You collect it from who?
From non-custodial parents.
No. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Isn't this,
So-
but doesn't this also include where the employer is
Yes.
garnishing the wage?
Yeah.
Okay.
The money is ultimately owed by the non-custodial parent, but income withholding is the main way that we collect the majority of the
Very good,
dollars.
thank you.
Yep. Okay. It cost just about $1.5 million to run the program in Clay County. So for every dollar we spent on running our program, we collected $5.73. So we're very cost effective. Sometimes the state says that's not always the ideal, that you should bring that down by spending more toward the program, but we're still quite a bit higher than the state average in that area.
So if you look at the grid prior to that slide, it shows the statewide average at the bottom is $3.63 for every dollar spent. And then you'll see, so that far right-hand column lists some of our like-sized counties and where we fall for every dollar spent, what we collect.
Okay. And then our case types, 8% of our cases are current assistance where they're receiving a cash grant or foster care. 45% are former assistants where they've received one of those programs in the past. And 47% of our cases have never received a cash grant. So 92% of our cases really depend on the support that's collected to help meet the needs of their family. And that's changed a lot. When I first started in child support, it was probably 70% of our caseload was public assistance cases, and 30% was non-public. So it's flipped.
So when an order goes out to an employer when they know that there is an employee who is subject to withholding for child support, does that full amount that is collected from the employee through the employer submitted to the county, does that full amount then go to the recipient?
It depends on what's owed on the obligation. Say someone's ordered to pay $500 a month, and $300 of that is basic support, $100 of that is child care, and $100 of that is medical, just for easy numbers. If they're not receiving cash assistance, that $300 basic support would go out the door. If they're not receiving medical assistance, that $100 for medical would go out the door to that custodial parent, but if they're receiving medical assistance, it would be retained to reimburse the state for the public program that they're receiving.
Okay.
And the same with child care, if they're getting child care assistance.
So they don't necessarily see all those funds based on what other benefits they're receiving from the
Yes.
county or the state?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then our last slide is just talking about recent changes that we dealt with in the last year, and then changes that we're working toward in the unit. The big change last year was e-filing. Again, that's a very time-consuming process. My only option in my unit is to have the child support officers doing their own e-filing, and what that entails is essentially scanning every type of document individually. You got to label them all so you know what they are. In an established case, that could be 12 to 15 documents. Some are multiple pages, some are one page. And then you have to pull all of those documents into the e-filing system to send it to the court. For some people, they've really picked up on this, and they've got it down to 10, 15 minutes for different things. For other people, it's a little more of a struggle, and it's taking 30, 40 minutes to get one case filed.
Sandy, can you describe what it was before e-filing?
Sure.
Just to
What- yeah,
get
what
the
a-
idea of the change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what it was before was we'd get the paperwork together, and we would give it to our clerical staff, who would do affidavits of service, copy everything, mail it out to the appropriate parties, and we were done. So the child support officer took it up to, here's the documents, and they were able to hand it off. We don't have the clerical staff to be able to do that for all of the people in doing the e-filing. So this is all added time to their work. The Affordable Care Act, we've just gone through the first steps of it that affected child support last month. So it changed a few things for us. We're not doing much with medical cases or cases where the person had been on Minnesota Care up until January 1st. What the state decided to do, because there's no interface with the computer system for medical at this time, is that if the medical obligation is assigned to reimburse the state for Minnesota Care, we closed out that case, or we ended the medical piece of it, because we can't ask someone to pay for something they may or may not still owe. So we're still waiting on that, and so that's also what we're working towards then, is knowing how Affordable Care Act is going to affect child support in Minnesota. We're also working towards streamlining the fraud referrals. That's something that the supervisors in income maintenance and I are trying to hammer out, how to get those to be more efficient, how to get the information back and forth between the units better, and clean up some of that area. And as a part of that, we're going to image those files. That's the only area in my unit that's not imaged yet, and we have a meeting on Thursday to get that set up so that we can start imaging and try and get rid of some of the paper that we're hanging on to. We also need then to create a write-off policy for uncollectible county debt. And then, again, I guess the Affordable Care Act was the last thing I had here. Questions?
Well, you know what? You brought us right to 9:45.
I said I wasn't going to do that, didn't I? I'm a good babbler.
Chairman Campbell, can I make
Sure,
a comment?
yes, Jenny. Yeah.
The child support portion of Sandy's unit is the unit that I work with legally. I do all the child support cases for the county attorney's office. And, you know, Sandy's presentation was very good in describing the work they do and the obstacles, especially in light of the Affordable Care Act and the e-filing and all that they're facing. But I've just come to know what a fabulous job that child support group does, and I just think the numbers and the presentation really reflect that. So it's a pleasure to work with them.
Thank you. I'll pass that on if they're not watching.
Yeah, thank you. That was very good. Very good report. Thank you.
for sharing.
Thank you very much. Good report.
All right.
And Jenny, maybe as we move forward on that one area that we talked about a little bit too, it would sure be nice to, if you would have time to sit in on a meeting with that, just to
Sure.
look at that. It'd be nice to get your thoughts on
Sure,
on that. Okay.
that'd be fine with me.
I'll kind of arrange something through Brian on that to set up something. Okay, very good. So we'll go back to our committee reports, and Wayne, you were done. Everybody else was done except for me, and I have one here. The only one I had last week was the Highway Tracking Committee meeting, and John kind of didn't have stuff, but we talked quite a bit about the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan is going to be, I think, coming out to the board next week for its final approval. Of course, each year, you know, you have a tendency that 1 year goes off and new projects come on. We were a little bit challenged this year because a couple of our projects that we were looking at, the dollar numbers came in significantly higher, to the tune of close to $1 million more in money, which was of some concern. But in the previous year, we also had some projects that were close to $1 million under. So we're going to try to find out the right balance. So far, we're keeping everything in that the engineers had recommended, and we're going to kind of have to do a wait and see on what the bids do, on how the bids come out. And so we'll be going through that shortly. We did have a discussion about the CASA designation. We have some roads here where we're going to be looking at swapping some roads that are currently county state aid highway roads that have lower daily traffic on them, and maybe look at switching to some higher roads within the county roads that have more adult daily traffic, where we're probably going to have to put more money into, which means we can, by switching that over to CASA, we get needs from the state to help work on those roads. So we're working on that through the highway tracking as well to find the best approach for that. Yeah, those were the two major items that we had on there, and I have nothing else. Darren, do you have anything on behalf of administration?
Just a quick couple things. I sat in on the two social services supervisors interviews that we had last week, and they've made 2 selections for that. So they'll be transitioning those 2 supervisors. To go along with that, we're going to have Dave Cornell supervisor training coming up in March 25th through 27th. We've got about 14 people signed up for that already. And had a managers meeting on Thursday. We talked about the lean event that we had for land management and trying to get some topics for some upcoming lean events this year. And also talked a little bit about the County Goals seminar or event that we're going to have on April 2nd to establish the county goals for the upcoming years. So that's all I have.
Okay. Vicki, anything? Jenny, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.